Today we're going to take a deep dive into the youth, into my inner child, into my inner youth. And we're going to speak to the next generation citizens, the next generation entrepreneurs, the next generation employers, employees, and help them help us to make sense of COVID-19. What are their perspectives? And then next week, we're going to go to the elders and ask some elders to share with us their perspective of time. And they are also those closest to death. And maybe they can share with us their wisdom, their perspectives of COVID-19. And then 3 weeks from now, hopefully through a tool, we're going to get all of you to help us make sense. What are your inputs after the 8, 9, 10 sessions so that we can start connecting new dots? Even if we have to reconnect old dots, but really to make this an applied way of figuring out how do we move forward. And somebody can really help us make sense about this is Sonja Blignaut. Sonja helps us to think about our thinking. And she's from More and Beyond, from Cognitive Edge. And Sonja, I mean, I've given a kind of a welcome on what we want to do, but maybe you can give us your perspective in that regard, specifically regarding resilience and diversity. So over to somebody who I really appreciate for your effort and time, Sonja. Really, these sessions would not have been possible without your input. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Casper. And I'm super excited about about the next 3 weeks. I'm not sure I can get all the adjectives out the way that you did, but I'm super excited. And I think one of the reasons, just speaking from a complexity perspective and reflecting on resilience, one of my big frustrations is the way that the world in general, and I think in South Africa in particular, we have framed the notion of diversity, because we've made diversity a problem to solve. And I believe it is a strategic asset to nurture, because if we don't have diversity, and I'm not only speaking about the superficial diversity, if I can call it that, things like gender and race. I'm also referring to diversity and perspectives and people, cognitive diversity. And, normally I really like to use a metaphor. If you think, for example, of the difference between a monoculture or like a sheep farm versus something like the Kruger National Park or a place with biodiversity. If something like a drought hits, I know that the natural system will survive because there's diversity. There's diversity in plants, there's diversity in animals, but the sheep farm, they kind of all die together because of a lack of diversity. And the same thing happens to human systems. So I really feel that we need to reframe how we look at diversity and difference. And that's why I'm really excited that, we're bringing the diversity of perspective into this group. And, maybe just one other thing to reflect on is something that we don't often think about is if there's no difference or no diversity in a system or in a company or in a society, there's also no potential for evolution or change. So if you think, for example, water, in order for water to flow, there needs to be a difference in levels. Otherwise, nothing can flow. And I really appreciate the work of Professor Mary Ulbeen, because she studied adaptive capacity and how the adaptive process works. And what she says is it's a combination of two processes, conflicting, and for conflicting, we actually need diversity and perspective. So can we hold a space where we can allow for different perspectives and all of these conflicting perspectives to come together, but then we also need connecting. And I think that's partly what we're going to be doing over the next few weeks, is to invite the different voices into our virtual room, potentially, have some conflicting voices, and then look at, so how can we connect and potentially get to something completely new? And maybe to bring it closer to today's session, I think very often young people in particular suffer from our privileging of similarity or homogeneity. I think it's much easier to manage when everything is the same. It's when we have all of these different voices. And I think in particular, young people are prone to asking quite uncomfortable questions. I'm thinking, for example, of Greta Thunberg in Sweden and, the young people that I know. And very often we tend to just silence them or, try and move them out of the way because it makes us uncomfortable. And I'm really excited that today we are making space for those voices. And I'm actually hoping that we are challenged by what we hear today and by the questions that get posed.